This is a special edition of Late Night Health. I'm Mark Alyn. We're going to talk with a good friend of mine, Pat Duckworth, and we're going to talk about menopause. We've talked about this before on the show. Pat has a brand new book out. It's called Menopause, Mind the Gap. Pat, first of all, it's great to see you. It's been such a long time. It's been at least a year that we've actually seen each other, though we email quite frequently. As you will hear in just a moment, Ms. Duckworth is from the UK, across the pond, as they say. She's in England, and we appreciate your spending some time with us. You have a new book out, Menopause, Mind the Gap. Do people understand what menopause is, both men and women in general?
Do you know, women are generally really under-informed about it. I don't know if there's a thing that they think that if they talk about it or read about it, it's going to bring it on and they don't want to get there. You know, it's that kind of, oh, I just want to keep it away as long as I can. And then the result of that is that they go into menopause not really knowing what their symptoms are. They self-diagnose and misdiagnose, and they don't take action that would really support their health, just simple things that they could be doing to support their health. And it not only affects them in their personal lives, it affects their work lives and careers as well. That's why it's like, mind the gap, you know, this gap's coming up.
Is menopause still a stigma? You know, we don't want to talk about it, so we'll ignore it?
It is. And I think that's because, well, loads of reasons. Firstly, it's about getting older, and that's still that stigma around aging. And for women, it's this massive life change from being their sort of fertile sex goddess into, oh, you know, am I becoming the crone? And there's so much negative wording around it. Just, you know, if I say the word menopause when I'm doing training sessions, nobody can come up with something positive to say about it. So yeah, there's a lot of taboo, a lot of stigma, and that's what I try and overcome by talking about it and through the books that I write.
And in your own personal life, uh, tell us about your journey through menopause, if you could, for just a moment.
Yeah, so those years before menopause, because menopause takes place around 50, just naturally, but it can, you know, a whole lot of other things I could tell you about it occurring in other situations. So in my late 40s, I was working in central government. I was a director. I had a lot of responsibility. I was traveling into central London every day, busy, busy life. And I was studying for an MBA at the time as well. And yet I felt all the time like I needed a new pair of glasses, like I couldn't focus properly. And I didn't know that this is one of the symptoms of menopause, not bad eyesight, but brain fog, where you just don't think as clearly as you used to. And I was very worried that as I approached 50, I might start getting hot flushes because, or hot flashes, as you call them in America. Um, Sitting on the train for an hour in the evening, you do not want to be getting that hot. So I started to worry about that. And what happens with a lot of women is starting to lose confidence because you're not sure what's going to happen, whether you're going to look, you know, a bit hot and sweaty in a meeting. Nobody wants that look because it looks like you're nervous, even if you're not. So I was experiencing those kind of things, the brain fog, the sort of losing my confidence a bit, the worrying about what other people were making of me. But then the wonderful thing happened, which does happen to women at menopause, is that I got this kind of new lease of life where I suddenly thought, well, why am I doing this job? Why am I, you know, up and down to London all the time? Why am I working for somebody who doesn't appreciate me? Life is wearing on. It's time to do what I want to do. And that happens to a lot of women at menopause because it's like the physical alarm clock goes off that says, you know, wake up, there's time to do something else.
Do most women misinterpret menopause and think it's the end of life, not the beginning of a new phase of life?
Absolutely, Mark, because that's the way it's kind of sold to us. that something really important is ending rather than, but what's the other side of it? And of course, you could be living 30, 40 years after your menopause. That's a big chunk of time. And it's a time when you're freed up from worries about fertility, you're freed up from the monthly cycle. It could be if you've had children, they've grown up and gone now. So actually, there's a lot of freedom around it. That is a really positive message. In fact, last year I was talking to a homeopath, a male homeopath, about it. And he said, "Are you still talking about menopause?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, he said, "I really envy women menopause because it's like a reboot. It's a reset button." I thought, yes, that's exactly what it's like. It's a chance to do things starting anew.
When you were working as a director in the government, had a lot of responsibility, did any of your supervisors notice the brain fog, and other symptoms of menopause?
No. And honestly, I had the sort of boss that you wouldn't have gone and talked to about it. And that's what I'm trying to overcome with the book as well, is to say to managers, you could be losing performance from your women employees at all levels. You might have senior leaders who don't want to talk about this. And 25% of women who experience symptoms think about leaving their career because they just
Wow.
can't cope and they don't want to talk about it. So you could be losing really valuable, knowledgeable employees just because the culture doesn't allow them to talk about what they're experiencing. And that's what happened. I'd had over 30 years in government. I could have been very valuable going forward, but nobody really stopped to ask about it.
Is this culture international? I mean, England and America, I would think would be pretty much the same, and maybe France and Germany, what's considered the Western world. Is this international? I mean, from the North Pole down to the South Pole, everybody? Do you know?
There are some cultural variations where there is a lot of Western cultural influence. The whole issue of aging is everywhere. What I would say about the workplace issue is that this is one area where the UK are leading the way in talking about this. And a lot of the public sector now, the foreword of my book is written by a chief fire officer who's a man. Um, who absolutely embraces that this is something that affects his female staff and he needs to do something about it. And I love that. So the public sector in the UK is taking a lot more interest, not just putting in place sticking plasters, just little adjustments. Oh, let me put a fan on your desk. They're actually putting in place menopause policies. They're talking to the women about what they need. They're setting up support. And of course, it just creates a completely different culture. When I talk about this to some of our colleagues in the US, they're kind of, "You're talking about what?" It's like, well, nobody talks about that. So if I can get this going in the US as well, I'll be very happy. But there are some cultures where older women are very much revered in the community as the knowledgeable people who can, through all of their wisdom, support the rest of the community. In those communities, women at menopause, it's not really an issue. But where there's a big Western influence, the whole aging thing takes over.
And they say that if men got pregnant, we wouldn't have overpopulation. I would think that men, there's a menopause of some kind that we have, right?
Yeah.
But if it was as bad as some women, you know, men would just jump off of a building.
There's a male version of it called andropause. I mean, it actually has a technical name.
Right.
And men who experience that intensely, they get hot flushes. They experience some of the same symptoms that women have.
I guess that's when the testosterone goes up and estrogen, or testosterone goes down, estrogen goes up.
Well, the testosterone's going down, but men produce estrogen as well, but that's going down as well. I mean, the reason that women get hot flushes is because their estrogen levels are dropping. But at the same time, there's another hormone called progesterone, and that's dropping too. And you get this imbalance going on. And for men, there's an imbalance in their male hormones that give rise to this. But some of the things that women worry about at menopause, like, putting on a bit of weight and not sleeping as well, not feeling quite as confident, their libido not quite as much. Men get that too. That's just part of, the whole way we change as human beings. But I think if men really experience some of the embarrassment that goes on around menopause, they might be a bit more sympathetic about it.
And that, of course, is what the book is all about: menopause, mind, the gap. Uh, in the workplace, because the book is designed for two audiences, as I see it. The first audience is HR people, business owners, executives of all kinds, but it's also good for women in general, so that one, they can plan for menopause in the workplace.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely, and can advocate for what they need. Because it is about having that role of, well, I need to tell somebody what it is I need for support so that I can get that support. And there's a really lovely case study in the book, which is from a female fire officer who's led the improvements within her service, talking about the adjustments that they've made. And sometimes it's quite simple, but if a woman hasn't asked for it, like, as firefighters, they wear uniforms. Those uniforms were designed for men because initially, all firefighters were men. They're not exactly comfortable if you're a woman going through menopause and you're getting hot. They've got tight waistbands with belts on them. And, if your waist is expanding and contracting as it does over menopause, that can get really uncomfortable. And if you're experiencing heavier or unexpected menstrual bleeding, which you can during menopause, and you're wearing light colored trousers, this can be a bit of an issue. So she talks about some of the things they've done about uniform, and some of the sanitary wear they now take in the fire engines so that the women know that there are supplies in there. It's simple stuff, and it makes a huge difference.
In the workplace, is that being adopted here in the U.S., do you know?
I don't think there's much conversation about it in the US, and that's why I'd really like to break that taboo and get more conversation about it. Because women might feel, well, in fact, there've been surveys and research done about it, Mark, that women feel uncomfortable talking to their managers about it. It doesn't matter whether the manager is male or female, younger or older, it's a personal subject. And what some women fear is that they'll be seen as older, past it, a problem, rather than just somebody who needs a bit of support through this stage so that they can really do their work properly. Because nobody goes to work to do a bad job. And so if we can overcome that embarrassment and create cultures where it's okay for women to talk about this, just as now it's okay to talk about maternity leave. I'm of that age, Mark. When I started work, women who got pregnant, they didn't stay in their jobs.
They lost their job, right?
They lost their jobs.
And
And and they didn't get maternity leave. Unless we talk about these things, we can't change them.
and now we have paternity leave.
Yeah.
Fathers get time off for when a new baby comes, and that's a step in the right direction, I think, for both men and women. And I think you're right. I think that we need to address menopause as managers, as business owners. And I think that your book gives a guideline on what to do. But every situation is unique. It's different. I mean, one woman might have hot flashes. Somebody else may be super irritable. uh, doesn't sleep well, somebody else sleeps well. How do you handle the individual cases?
That's why you need to have the conversation, because you can't just look at somebody who's approaching 50 and say, right, I know what you need. Because all their experiences are different. And for some women, they will sail through it, just as some women, well, when you're a little girl and you get to puberty, some girls go through puberty, they get a couple of spots, it's all done. Others, like go through years of mood swings and acne and all sorts of, and anxiety and all sorts of other stuff. It's the same at menopause. About 25% of women will sail through it, not a problem, didn't even notice it. 75% of women experience symptoms that can disrupt them at work. Probably about a quarter of those will get like frequent and intense symptoms that mean that they really need some assistance. So we need to look at it case by case, and that's why you need to be able to talk about it. As a manager, you've got to overcome the embarrassment, because it's just a stage of life, and be able to talk about it in a way that means you can make the adjustments.
And most women, as you just pointed out, do go through and have symptoms that can affect their work. With if I don't sleep well and I have to get up the next morning and talk to somebody, I don't do as good a job as if I got a good night's sleep. So I would imagine night after night of that would be horrific if you're working.
Yeah, and you've put your finger on it, that sleep is often the first victim of menopause. That women, they start out, perhaps they're missing the odd night of sleep, they don't realize what it is, they don't take any notice of it, and then regularly they're waking up during the night, or they can't get to sleep because they're feeling anxious, or they're waking up too early, and then they get to work. And of course, poor sleep leads to a whole bunch of stuff. It leads to the brain fog, the anxiety, the loss of confidence, can lead to weight gain. If you're not sleeping well, it's much harder to control your weight. So, and it can be that if you adjust your hours a bit, if you can have flexible working time, or just come in a bit later so you can be in bed a little bit longer in the morning, you've sorted it out. But if you're
That
not
easy.
talking about it, and you don't know why you're not sleeping well, and you know that sleeping tablets aren't helping, and that's why we need to be really well informed about it.
The whole thing is communication. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's communicating between a woman and her supervisor in the workplace. And then that same conversation should take place at home as well.
Yes, and in fact, what I loved when I went to speak to the fire officers was that one of them, his wife had, I don't love this, that she'd had 3 years of really bad symptoms. And he obviously he was really distressed for her, because she seemed to be in really low mood, wasn't sleeping well, really affecting her work, affecting her at home. She was, in a bad way, and she wasn't getting what she needed in terms of medical support for it, because they kept saying she'd got depression, and she hadn't got depression. She was just going through menopause. Now, because he took her through that process and understood the conversations she's had with doctors, he's now a real advocate. He talks to the other firefighters of, you need to take this stuff seriously, because it might be affecting the woman in your life. It could be affecting you as well, because if your partner isn't sleeping well, if you're worrying about your partner, your life's not so good either.
Right. With menopause, there are benefits, right? Are there not? You mentioned some of these.
Absolutely. And so not worrying about contraception, you're not having to deal with monthly periods, so you're not taking around handbags full of sanitary ware, which some of us had to do. And you get a kind of a mental reboot. I sincerely think that just as at puberty, the brain does some rewiring, I think it does at menopause as well. And I've read some research about this, so that a lot of women start to tune into their purpose. What was it I really wanted to do? What am I here for? And now I'm at this stage, that's what I want to do. There's like a new focus because you're not taking care of young children anymore. You might not have to take care of your partner as much as you used to. And there's a kind of a freedom to start pursuing what you wanted to do. And that's certainly what happened to me. And I've got many, many stories of other women feeling that same effect of liberation to do what I want to do.
You left a well-paying gig and started your own consulting and mentoring program all about menopause.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. The name of the book, as you can see right now, is Menopause: Mind the Gap, by my friend Pat Duckworth. We met years ago. We've seen each other at least 3 or 4 times, mostly here in California, I believe, when she's come to some events that I've also attended. Always a delight. And by the way, having nothing to do with menopause, Pat is a great cook and a super gardener. Her tomatoes this last summer, I was so jealous. They were great looking. But your tomatoes, European tomatoes in general, are better than what we get here in the U.S. But we'll leave that for another time.
I
Pat,
could give
thank
you
you.
those tips another day.
Yes, thank you. Hold on, I'm going to ask about that. Somebody told me I might have nematodes in my ground. I don't even know what that is. I'm Mark Alyn, for Pat Duckworth. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.